Welcome back to Deep, Dark Depths, where we explore the most terrifying corners of reality that usually remain hidden in shadows. Tonight's story takes us to a lonely zoo during a massive storm, where the animals are not the only things watching. Working the night shift at a zoo sounds peaceful, but when the sun goes down, the atmosphere changes into something sinister. The rain lashed against the windows, a relentless drumbeat that echoed the growing fear in my heavy heart tonight. I sat there with my coffee, trying to ignore the feeling that something was wrong, but the storm made it impossible. Time seemed to move slower than usual, dragging every second out until it felt like an eternity in this dark place. My partner for the night, JJ, walked in looking like he had just swam through a river, dripping water everywhere.
He grumbled about the storm, cursing the weather forecast for lying to us about the severity of the rain tonight. We settled in for what we thought would be a boring night of checking locks and drinking stale instant coffee. But the zoo has a way of playing tricks on your mind when the lights go out and the silence falls. From above, the winding paths looked like a maze designed to trap anyone foolish enough to wander them alone at night. The wind howled through the trees, creating shapes that looked like grasping hands trying to reach out and grab us. It was my turn to do the first round of patrols, a task I usually enjoyed, but tonight I dreaded it. JJ told me to be careful out there, joking that the monkeys might try to escape in this chaotic weather. I stepped out into the chaos, the wind hitting me with enough force to almost knock me off my feet immediately. The beam of my flashlight was barely enough to see 5 feet in front of me through the thick wall of rain. Thunder cracked overhead like a gunshot, illuminating the empty monkey cages for a split second, before darkness returned. The tarps covering the bird cages snapped in the wind, sounding like footsteps following me down the empty concrete path. I stopped and turned around, convinced I heard someone walking behind me. But there was nothing but rain and shadows. I shook off the feeling and continued towards the herbivore section, where the zebras and giraffes were usually sleeping peacefully. The zebra enclosure appeared ahead, the wooden fences looking slick and black under the harsh beam of my flashlight. Most of the animals were huddled in the shelter, but one zebra was standing alone in the middle of the paddock. I squinted through the downpour and realized it was Pepper, a usually skittish male who hated being out in the rain. He was standing perfectly still, not shivering, not moving a muscle, just staring blankly into the dark fence line.
I called out his name, expecting his ears to twitch or his head to turn, but he remained frozen, like a statue. I shined my light directly at his face, but there was no eye shine, just a dull void where life should be. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the storm raced down my spine, freezing me in my tracks. Suddenly, Pepper's neck began to move, but not in a smooth animal motion. It jerked like a broken machine. It twisted past the point of comfort, bones audibly cracking as the head rotated further than any living animal could. His head was now completely upside down, looking back at me with those dead, soulless eyes that pierced the darkness. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs, unable to process the horrific sight standing before me. Then, it started to walk towards me, its legs moving with a stiff, disjointed rhythm while the head remained twisted. Panic took over, and I turned around, sprinting back towards the guard station, as fast as my legs could carry me. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, locking it instantly, gasping for air as if I was drowning. JJ looked up, startled by my entrance, and asked what the hell had happened out there in the dark. I tried to explain, but the words got stuck in my throat, sounding like the ramblings of a madman. He handed me some water and told me to breathe, thinking I had just been spooked by the thunder.
I finally managed to tell him about Pepper, about the neck, about the way it looked at me. JJ laughed nervously, suggesting it was just a trick of the shadows and the rain playing on my mind. We both looked out the window, but the darkness was absolute, hiding whatever secrets were waiting in the enclosure. The night dragged on, and an uneasy silence settled over the room, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. JJ decided he needed to stretch his legs and check the administrative building, leaving me alone with the monitors. I watched him leave, feeling a knot in my stomach tighten as the door clicked shut behind him. One of the monitors flickered with static, drawing my attention to the camera feed from the lion enclosure. The image cleared enough to show the lions huddled together in the far corner, acting like scared kittens. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life, the static loud and harsh in the quiet room, making me jump. It was JJ, asking me why I had followed him to the admin building instead of staying at the post. I grabbed the radio and told him I hadn't moved an inch, that I was still sitting right here. There was a long pause on the other end, a silence that felt heavier than the storm outside. JJ's voice came back, trembling, saying he could see me standing at the end of the hallway right now. I yelled at him to get out of there.
That it wasn't me. That something else was in the building.
In the hallway, JJ stared at the figure that looked exactly like me, wearing my uniform, standing perfectly still. The figure slowly raised its hand and waved, a stiff, jerky motion that mirrored the zebra I saw earlier. JJ didn't wait to see more. He turned and bolted for the exit, terror lending speed to his feet. I watched on the monitor as JJ sprinted past the camera, but the hallway behind him appeared to be empty. He crashed into the room, slamming the door and locking it, his face pale as a ghost, gasping for air. We sat there in silence, listening to the rain and our own heartbeats, realizing we were trapped with something unholy. Suddenly, the power cut out, plunging us into darkness, save for the eerie blue glow of the surveillance monitors. Then, a sound came over the radio that froze our blood. The distinct,
Crying voice of a little girl. It was pleading for help, crying out, "Please, help me," over and over. But the tone was slightly off. We looked at each other, confusion warring with fear. How could a child be inside the zoo at this hour? We traced the signal and realized with horror that the voice was transmitting from inside the main lion enclosure. Despite every instinct telling us to stay put, we knew we couldn't leave a child out there alone. We grabbed our gear and headed back out into the storm, the wind now screaming like a wounded animal. The path to the lion den was treacherous, littered with fallen branches and flooded with muddy water from the rain. We arrived at the lion house and found the main door slightly ajar, creaking back and forth in the wind. Stepping inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet fur and a heavy, metallic scent, like old blood. The crying was louder in here, echoing off the concrete walls, guiding us deeper into the belly of the building. We reached the viewing area, shining our lights through the thick glass into the enclosure, searching for the child. The lions, usually the kings of this domain, were pressed against the back wall, trembling in absolute terror. Suddenly, the crying stopped, replaced instantly by a low, distorted giggle that didn't sound human at all. From the shadows in the center of the enclosure, a shape began to emerge, something that defied logical explanation. It looked vaguely human, but wrong, with limbs that were too long, moving on all fours like a spider. It lifted its head to look at us, and where a face should be, there was only a smooth, pale surface. Then it spoke, not with a child's voice, but with JJ's voice, asking, "Why did you leave me?" The real JJ screamed beside me, the sound of his own voice coming from that monster, breaking his mind. The creature lunged at the glass with impossible speed, slamming against it with force that shook the whole building. We didn't wait for the glass to break. We turned and ran, fleeing into the storm, driven by pure, primal fear. We made it back to the office and barricaded the door, piling everything we could find against the entrance. We spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner, listening to scratching sounds moving around the building's exterior. Finally, the sun began to rise. The storm faded, and the scratching stopped, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. We cautiously opened the door, stepping out into the fresh morning air, looking for any sign of the night's horrors. We walked straight to the zebra enclosure, needing to know if what I saw earlier was real or a hallucination. There, lying on the wet grass, was Pepper, or rather, what was left of him after the night's events. It was just his skin, flayed perfectly and spread out on the ground, with no bones, meat, or blood remaining.
I realized then that the thing wearing Pepper's skin had shed it, moving on to a new disguise to hide in. We quit that day, but I know it's still out there, wearing someone else's skin.
Thanks for watching Deep Dark Depths.